If your articulation is correct and you are ready to set up your teeth, there are a number of markings that you need to make that are going to assist you in setting up the posterior teeth. So the first marking that we are going to inscribe is the marking of the center of the mandibular ridge. I'll mark the center of my ridge using a colored pencil, and then what I will do is I'm going to transfer this line to the back of my model. I will be using a ruler to transfer this line to the back of the model. So I will so after I would have done that, then I will just elongate the line at the back. So just maybe to make it easier for me to draw this line, I will have to remove the mandibular cast from the articulator. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this marking from the back of the model and transfer it to the maxillary model. After I would have done that, then I will draw a 2mm line that is distal to the first line. So I'm going to use my ruler to transfer this line. Make sure that when you are doing this, that the pin is actually sitting on the incisal table. Assist me in transferring the line that's on the mandibular model to the maxillary model. What I've done is I've inverted my articulator, so the upper member is sitting on the table, and this will make the drawing of the lines much easier for me. So I'm going to transfer the line that is from the mandibular model and using a ruler to my maxillary model. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Okay, and then after doing that, then I'm going to draw a 2mm line that is distal to the first line. And these lines are going to assist me in setting up the maxillary posterior teeth. Okay, these are my markings. So as you can see, I have transferred the line that represents the center of the mandibular ridge to the maxillary model. Then I have drawn a line that is 2mm distal to that line there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the lower model from the articulator to attach the occlusal plane table, right, because that is going to assist us in knowing exactly where to place our teeth. Given that we are not using a bite block in guiding us in knowing exactly where to place the teeth in relation to the curvature of the patient's mouth, what we are going to use to assist us in forming the anterior arch curvature is this circle here. So there will be a number of these circles that will be given during class, and what you will need to do is place this circle at the start of the notch, and what you then need to do is trace the outline of the circle using a pencil. You just need to outline half of the circle, and then this is what you should have. So this curve is going to assist us in knowing exactly where to place our teeth. In the lab, because you'll be using a bite block, what you will then use to guide you in terms of knowing exactly where to place the teeth is the actual curvature of the bite block. So after you would have done that, you will then need to form a base plate, and then on that base plate we are going to form a mini rim. For this case, you only need 2 wax sheets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to dip my model into some water so that when I do create my base plate, that it does not stick to the model. Okay, I wouldn't advise you soaking your model in water because if you soak your model in water, the water may actually result in the model separating from the plaster. So you do not want to soak your model for too long, so just dipping it in water should be sufficient. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create my base plate. If you feel comfortable creating your base plate with the model of the articulator, you can do that. So we always start from the center and we move out. If you want to fold the wax onto itself in the sulcus area so that you can be able to duplicate the width and depth of the sulcus. Okay, from this point on, I'm going to cut away all the excess wax that I don't need. Okay, at this point, I'm not going to worry so much. Cutting my posterior border according to the anatomical landmarks that I will do when I'll be finishing off the waxwork. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just slightly flame around my base plate. Right, and then I'm going to readapt it to just ensure that the wax is actually fully in the sulcus area. Okay, and what you should have is, as you can see, the thickness and depth of the sulcus has been formed. So the next thing that I want to do is trim away all the excess wax that is not part of the thickness of the sulcus. So then what I want to do is readapt, because when I was cutting away the excess wax, I may have distorted my base plate. So I'm just gonna just flame it a little bit and readapt it again. So readapt. Okay, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to place my wire strengthener. Right, remembering not to place it on the insides of papilla. So, right, and then remember, in terms of length, your wire strengthener should be from around the premolar to premolar region, and ensure that when you are inserting or placing the wire, that you do not push it too far in. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mini rim. When I will be constructing my rim, I will need to ensure that the facial aspect of my rim is sitting in line with the marking that I have made. So I'm going to use half a sheet of wax to create this mini rim. So I'm going to stretch it out because I need a bit of length. I'm going to try and make it into like a box or a square shape. Right, so, and then I'm going to place it to see how far it goes. Okay, when I would have formed my mini rim, I also need to ensure that the incisal pin is sitting on the incisal table. So from this point on, I can then seal the rim to the base plate. Again, if you find that removing your model from the articulator to do the sealing feels comfortable to you, you may do that. So this should be fine. I'm not going to concentrate so much on finishing off my wax at this point in time. I will neaten up my wax when I would have completed the setting up of the teeth. So you don't want to waste time and try and neaten up your wax work at this moment in time. So that should be fine. Okay, so this is the situation that I have. As you can see, the shape of my rim closely resembles that curve that I have drawn on the occlusal plane table. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to transfer the midline that is from my model to my rim. Right, this is going to assist me in positioning the centrals. So I will use a ruler to do this. Now, remembering that as much as I'm transferring this line transferring the midline from the model, you also need to double check that the line is still in line with the notch, right, as well as in line with the incisal pin. If you would have articulated correctly, that should be the case, right? There shouldn't be any disconnection between the incisal pin, the model, as well as the notch as alignment. Before you begin to set up your teeth, it's important that you know which teeth are for the maxillary model and which one are for the mandibular model. So how do we tell? So if you take a card of teeth, right? So this is known as a card of teeth. You're going to see that there is a brand name that is written on the card. So we are using Zenith teeth. And then you have here, which is known as the mold number, and then you have here, which is known as the shade number. So the shade number tells you the color of the teeth. So with each brand, there's different shades of teeth, and with each shade, it corresponds to like a code. So the code here is D3. And then here you have the mold name. So the mold name tells you the length of the teeth, the height of the teeth, as well as the shape of the teeth. So we are going to go in depth in your dental technology theory lecture when we are going to be talking about the selection of teeth. It is usually the dentist who selects the teeth, but as a dental technician, it's important that you understand how teeth are selected. So teeth also come in different shapes. You get oval, you get tapering, you get square teeth. So that's the mold name, and then you get the shade code. So when the dentist would have selected the anterior teeth or the maxillary anterior teeth, then there is something that's called a mold chart. A mold chart is basically a booklet which then tells you if you would have selected these maxillary anterior teeth, it will then give you the corresponding mandibular teeth as well as posterior teeth. So in this case, that's the maxillary anterior teeth. Then you get the mandibular corresponding teeth, and these are the posterior teeth. Be careful not to mix the teeth, but I trust that you know your tooth morphology, so you will not mix your teeth up. But always ensure that the name of the brand is actually placed the right way around. So then you know that these are your maxillary teeth and these are your mandibular teeth. Okay, so now when you will be setting your teeth, you are going to have a set of notes that you are going to be reading that are going to assist you in actually setting up the teeth. So when you do set up the teeth, as I would have mentioned in your theory lecture, the teeth have different rotations, angulations, and these rotation and angulations actually assist in restoring the speech of the patient, as well as the appearance of the patient. So it's important that when you set the teeth that you conform to these angulations and rotations of the teeth. So before you set your teeth, ensure that you've actually read how each tooth is supposed to be set against the occlusal plane table. So for the maxillary central incisors, this tooth is placed so that the long axis of the tooth shows a slight distal inclination. Right, the key word there is a slight distal inclination to the occlusal plane, and the incisal edge of the centrals needs to be on the occlusal plane table. So you will also have drawings which are going to clearly show you how this angulation and rotation of the tooth should actually be. I'm going to set my centrals. So what you can do is you can soften up the wax in the area where you want to place your tooth. Okay, what other people prefer doing is actually slightly cutting off the wax, but I prefer to just soften it. So then what I'm going to do is place my central, like so. So I don't know if you can see that. So like that. So I've placed it, ensuring that the mesial, ensuring that the mesial surface of the tooth is in line with the midline that I had placed. Another way to check my midline is to use my incisal pin. So I'm going to close one eye and just to see that it's actually placed correctly. So at this point, I've just placed my tooth. As you can see, okay, it's actually not set in the correct position because the incisal edge needs to be in line with the circle that I have created. So I'm just going to try and push my tooth backwards. So what may happen is that the wax that is found on the lingual surface may restrict the movement of the tooth. So what you want to do is you want to soften that wax as well so that the tooth can actually move back. So when I'm doing this, I'm also stabilizing my tooth so that it doesn't move or from the wax. So I'm just blocking it so that it doesn't. So can you see, as I'm moving or as I'm melting away that wax at the back, you can actually see the lingual surface of the tooth. Now it's going to be much easier for me to move that tooth back. So I'm moving it slightly back so that it's actually in line with that marking that I made. Okay, so the incisal edge of my tooth is now sitting on the occlusal plane table, but it is also said that this tooth, or the long axis of the tooth, must have a slight distal inclination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften the wax around the tooth so that I can be able to actually shift the neck of the tooth so that it has a slight distal inclination. So there we go. So my tooth now has a slight distal inclination. So now I'm going to set up the other central. Okay, what other people have done in the past, maybe you will find that with your occlusal plane table, there's like an engraving of this line that I've drawn, because as you can see, as I'm trying to set up, the line is actually rubbing, or the line is actually rubbing off. So what you can do, instead of using a pencil, you can also use like an instrument, or a scalpel blade, so you are sure that the marking is not going to rub off. So again, the first thing that I'm going to ensure is that my tooth is actually sitting flat on the occlusal table. Okay, and then I'm going to move it slightly back so that it is in line with the other tooth. Okay, so now they're both in line. So what I'll also do, because if you look carefully here, you're gonna see that there's like a pile of wax. So this wax is actually distorting my view, and I can't really tell if my midline is actually, if the midline of the centrals are actually aligned to that midline or to the incisal pin. So I'm going to use my lacron, right, to remove the wax around the tooth. It's very important that the wax does not obstruct the view of the teeth, because what you want to ensure is that before you move on to set the next tooth, you need to ensure that the inclination and rotation and angulation of each tooth is actually correct. So at this moment in time, I now need to ensure that my tooth has a slight distal inclination. Okay, again, I'm just going to facilitate the movement of my tooth. I'm just going to soften the wax again around the tooth. So if you don't soften the wax around your tooth and you move it, yes, it will move, but what will happen is it will only move back to its initial position. So you just need to ensure that you have softened the wax all around the tooth. Okay, so again, I'm just going to clear any excess wax that is found around the teeth. So as you can see, I have set up my centrals. So I'm also going to remove the excess wax lingually. Using the spoon side of my wax knife, I'm just going to melt the wax away. Okay, right, and as you can see, my teeth have a slight curvature. You can see that when I'll be placing the rest of the teeth, that it will be in a curve. I'm going to concentrate on just setting up the second quadrant, then I will move on to the first quadrant. You can start with the first quadrant if you want, but I don't know, it just feels natural for me to start with this side, then moving to this other side. Another thing that you need to just ensure, which I did but I didn't just emphasize, you also need to ensure that the necks of the teeth have a slight depression. Now, the mistake that most first-time denture setters make is when they are slightly depressing the neck of the central, they tend to then lift up the incisal edge of the tooth. You need to avoid that. So when you are, if you slightly depress the neck of the central, the incisal edge shouldn't then incline. If it happens that you have depressed your neck and you find that now your teeth have like an inclination, like when you look at them from a profile view. So if you look at, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there we go. So if you look at my teeth from the profile view, you can see that the facial or the middle and incisal third of my teeth actually have a flat surface. So those surfaces are actually perpendicular to the occlusal plane. If you find that when you're looking at your teeth from the facial view and you find that there is a slight inclination, so a shape that is similar to how your bite block would look anteriorly, then that means that you have done something incorrect. So the error that you would have made is you would have pushed the necks too far in. So you will then need to correct that by lifting up your necks slightly. This is what you want to have. I don't know if it is clear. If it's not so clear, I will be able to show you this when I'll be going around looking at your teeth. So the next thing that the next tooth now that I'm going to set up is the lateral. The lateral has a slightly more distal inclination than the central incisor, and the incisal edge is usually a 1/2 to 1 millimeter above the occlusal plane. So one thing that you need to do, you're going to place your lateral. So I will suggest that the very first time when you place your lateral, just place the incisal edge of the lateral on the occlusal plane. First, adjust the distal inclination. Now it is said that the inclination of the lateral is slightly more than that of the central. And after you would have done this, I will suggest that then you would lift up your central to be about 1/2 to 1 millimeter off the occlusal plane, and then after that the neck of the lateral is much more depressed than the central incisors neck. So it's a lot to remember, but you need to ensure that as you are setting up that you are looking at your notes so that you are not lost and you know exactly what you need to do. So again, I'm just going to soften up the area where I want my tooth to be placed. Okay, so initially I'm just going to place it in a way that the incisal edges are actually in line. So as you can see, the edge is on the occlusal plane, but as you can see, I've already set the long axis of the lateral to be slightly more distal than that of the central. And what I've also done is, so I don't know if you're also going to be able to see this, but let me do this so that you'll be able to see. So if you compare the neck of my central and that of my lateral, can you see that the neck is much more depressed than that of the central? So I've managed, when I was placing my tooth, to get the inclination correct as well as the depression of the neck correct. So the only thing that I have to do now is just lift up my tooth. Okay, so in order for me to do that, I need to soften the wax all around my tooth. So the movement of the tooth will be much easier. Okay, with that said, you also just need to ensure that your lateral is actually within the curvature. Okay, so what I like to do is I just put my instrument underneath and I will lift up my tooth like so. You can clearly see the difference between the teeth. So you're going to see that the lateral is actually off the occlusal plane table. What you also need to know when you're working with wax, and especially when you're setting up the teeth, is that the wax shrinks. So as the wax actually sets, it contracts. So what you also need to be mindful of is that as much as you are moving on with setting up your teeth, just keep on double checking on the rest of your teeth that they actually still have the required relationship to the occlusal plane. Alright, can you see the nice curvature that I'm forming with my teeth? Okay, so the next tooth to set up is your canine. The maxillary canine is placed so that the long axis is almost vertical. It may have a slight distal inclination but should not lean mesially. The incisal tip is on the occlusal plane table. And with the neck of the canine, the neck should be prominent. So it should be sticking out more than that of the lateral. So remembering the canine must have a slight distal inclination. It must be almost vertical. And the incisal edge of the canine needs to sit on the occlusal table. And the neck must be prominent. Okay, I still need to just remember that for my teeth to actually follow the line that I've drawn. Can you see how all the incisal edges of my teeth are actually in line with the curvature that I have created? Okay, so if I were to look at my teeth from the frontal view, they look like so. So there. So can you see, I don't know if you can be able to see the difference. So the central has a slight distal inclination, has a more distal inclination, looks almost vertical. The edges of, or the incisal edges of my teeth are on the table. So the one for the canine has just slightly contracted, so it's off the table. So there we go. Sorry, there we go. So that's my first side completed. Now I'm going to do the other side. So can you see the curvature that I was talking about? So I'm just again going to remove any excess wax so it does not obstruct my view. So I'm going to do the other side now. What you don't want to do is do all this work and then you find out that your inclination and rotations are incorrect and now you have to start again. ensure before you move on to the next tooth that your inclination, rotations, and angulations are actually correct. And sometimes you may not get the positioning of your tooth correct the first time round, and you'll have to keep on tweaking your tooth until you actually get the position correct. But the important thing is, do not move to your next tooth if the previous one that you have done is not correctly placed. So what I try and do is, when I place my tooth, I imagine the inclination. So it makes it easy for me to actually place the tooth. Obviously, for you, it will take a bit of practice. Alright, since I know where my curvature is going, I can actually remove the excess wax there because I do not need it, and it will just end up being in my way when I'll be setting up the posterior teeth. Alright, so as you can see, I have my curvature. I may have to just refine it there because I can see, if you look very carefully, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but if you look very carefully, can you see there's a nice continuity, but when you come to this end, there's like a dip here. Alright, so I'm going to try and refine the curvature there. Actually, I see where the problem is. My my lateral distal surface is much more in. So it's much more in than it should be. So I'm just going to try and twist my tooth so that it follows the curvature of the rest of the teeth. So there we go. With that said, I still need to just double check that everything else is still fine. So I can see that by doing that, I have slightly lifted my tooth a bit more than I need to. So I need to sort that out. So as you can see, as much as I have set my teeth and I had thought that everything was fine, I am still checking with every move that I make how the other teeth are still looking. There we go, I've set my teeth. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean off the excess wax again on the surface of my teeth so that I can be able to see them clearly. See? Okay, I'm just going to clean off my occlusal plane table. Okay, so have a closer look at my teeth. As you can see, this side again, my central is sitting flat on the incisal table. My lateral is off the table. My canine's incisal edge is on the table. If you look at the inclination of the teeth, you're going to see that the lateral is much more distally inclined than that of the central. And then my canine, right, as you can see, it has a similar inclination to the lateral. And the correct inclination, it should have a slightly less inclination than that of the lateral. So I'm going to sort that out. So checks are very important when you are setting up your teeth. You need to check and check and check again. So I'm just going to move my canine slightly in the mesial direction so that it decreases or it minimizes the distal inclination that it had. Oopsie. Okay, now I will say that looks just about right. So yeah, so if you have a look at it, can you see that has more inclination, less inclination, less inclination. It's also very important that you seal your teeth to the wax. So if you find that as you are trying to touch your teeth, that it actually moves out of place, it shouldn't be that when you touch your teeth that they move out of place. If you do this and your teeth actually move out of place, then that means you need to just seal them down. So it just means you take a hot instrument and go around the tooth so that the wax can seal against the tooth. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to try and neaten up my wax anteriorly. I'm not going to spend so much time again because when all the teeth have been set, there is something that is called festooning, when you'll be trying to create the natural form of the gingiva around the teeth, and that's when you usually spend a lot of time neatening up your wax. So here I'm just neatening up the wax so that it does not obstruct my view of the length of the teeth.